They came not with fire, but with silence. The skies shimmered with their arrival, massive crafts shaped like nothing in Earth's skies before, hovering as if gravity held no claim over them. Cities from Shanghai to Chicago fell under their shadows. The world stood still. No announcements, no bombs, no blood, just presence. When their voice finally came, it wasn't a voice at all. It was a transmission. Every screen, every frequency, every device flickered to life. The tone was calm, measured, almost gentle. They offered peace, technology, cooperation. A mutual exchange, they said. Resources for knowledge. Help for help. But humanity had heard such words before. From kings to colonizers, the script was old. The offer was cloaked in respect, but beneath the surface pulsed something colder: ownership. A few nations welcomed them, dazzled by holographic gifts and energy constructs that bent physics like glass. They believed they had reached the end of hunger, poverty, war. Others hesitated. Some vanished from diplomatic tables altogether. Across the world, voices grew divided. Was this salvation, or surrender? Weeks passed. Oceans churned as massive alien harvesters anchored themselves in deep waters. Earth's rare elements began vanishing. Forests thinned. Seabeds ruptured. Reports surfaced of entire wildlife biomes gone overnight. When questioned, the visitors responded only with politeness. The treaty allowed them usage. Usage without oversight, boundaries, or limits. Governments were advised not to interfere. Satellites that monitored them went dark. Surveillance drones returned in pieces. And still, no weapons had fired. No soldiers had landed. Just quiet extraction. Quiet erasure. In the silence, something began to stir, not in governments, but in people. A satellite technician in Brazil noticed patterns in how the ships fed. A scrapyard mechanic in Lahore deciphered how their collectors responded to magnetic interference. A linguist in Lagos uncovered a hidden code in their diplomatic transmissions: coordinates, unguarded resource caches, drone frequencies. None of them wore uniforms. None of them were ordered. But they acted. Across continents, threads of resistance began to weave, not around weapons, but around knowledge, strategy, observation. The invaders weren't gods. They simply hadn't yet been challenged. A test came in the Amazon. A lone harvester failed to return. The aliens blamed jungle interference. But video leaked, grainy, black and white thermal footage. Human figures had surrounded the massive machine. It didn't explode. It collapsed, as if torn apart from the inside by nothing visible. The video went viral in the black channels, underground feeds, rogue AIs, encrypted peer-to-peer nets. It bore no logo, no name. Just one sentence burned across the bottom: asterisk. They bleed too. Asterisk. In response, more alien drones arrived. More calm statements were made. More resources were stripped. But they noticed it now: how cities turned quiet not in awe, but in defiance. How workers moved with the eyes of watchers. How their drones began to disappear in the night. They called it non-cooperative instability. Humans called it principle. What the invaders didn't understand was simple. Earth had known centuries of conflict. It had suffered dictators, empires, occupations, exploitation, all with soft voices and beautiful gifts. Yet it survived. Not by power, but by memory. Humanity remembered. And what they remembered now was this: no one comes to help you without a price. And if the price is freedom, the answer is war, whether declared or not. The invaders had taken resources. They had taken air, land, water. But they had not taken fear. Because fear was already dead. Power shifted without ceremony. Where once presidents and premiers stood, now sat quiet, compliant figures, the Collaborator Council, installed not by force, but by favor. The aliens never fired a shot. They didn't need to. They offered control in exchange for obedience, and many accepted, believing compliance was survival. Cities gleamed under new energy grids, powered by alien tech. Hunger and unemployment dropped. Disease clinics opened overnight. It looked like utopia, but it felt like a graveyard. The silence in the streets wasn't peace. It was containment. Yet beneath that still surface, something vast and invisible grew. It wasn't coordinated from a single bunker, led by any general, or funded by any state. It lived in whispers. In code. In shared looks between strangers. In skipped data packets, pulse transmissions, and rewritten firmware. The resistance had no name because it had no center. It was an idea, and ideas don't die when you shoot them. In the old subway tunnels beneath Paris, an engineer reverse engineered a crashed drone using parts from a microwave. In Siberia, a teenager repurposed heating coils to create an EMP burst that disabled a surveillance node for 7 minutes, long enough for something important to pass. In Mumbai, a former journalist turned smuggler carried hard drives between slums, encrypted with files that could destabilize alien energy conduits. No orders. No medals. Just resolve. They began with sabotage. Minor at first. Power fluctuations. Grain silos ruined. Communication towers shorted. The aliens ignored it, seeing it as environmental chaos or human incompetence. But the patterns didn't lie. Every week, another extractor failed. Another resource zone vanished off their scans. They upgraded their patrols. Sent more drones. Released calming messages. And for the first time, the aliens used a word they had avoided since arrival: dissent. They began detaining humans, not with weapons, but with bureaucratic disappearance. Vanishing from records. Plucked from streets and relocated to isolation zones. The Collaborator Council called it quarantine for social restoration. But Earth had seen that before too. And Earth remembered. The resistance adapted. Encrypted communication evolved into living code, shifting, learning, alive. Disconnected cells began to act as one without ever speaking. Every captured drone became a gift. Every stolen battery a heartbeat. And slowly, a picture formed: how their ships moved, where their signals clustered, what they feared. It wasn't weapons. It wasn't rebellion. It was unpredictability. To them, humans were inefficient. Illogical. Fractured. But logic was predictable. Principle was not. The invaders couldn't understand sacrifice without reward, defiance without probability, or rage without cause. So they miscalculated. Every time. What they called chaos was coordination without hierarchy. A species that had evolved not just to fight, but to learn, adapt, and defy, even without hope. Especially without hope. And the invaders began to bleed. First, a transport vessel lost all power mid-flight and crashed into the Atlantic. No known projectile fired. No impact. Just silence. A coordinated magnetic event triggered by homemade satellites rigged with stolen alien capacitors. Then, an orbital refinery vanished. The aliens denied it publicly, but internally, their ranks fractured. Security tightened. Access restricted. What was once open began to close. But it was already too late. The resistance had seen behind the veil. Understood their patterns. And they knew now. The aliens hadn't invaded out of desperation. They came out of greed. They believed Earth was an easy harvest. That humanity, fractured and self-wounded, would submit if given comfort. But principle doesn't bend for comfort. Not forever. Now, there was no going back. No more illusions. No more peace. The resistance wasn't building an army. They were preparing a lesson. The first true strike wasn't loud. It didn't level a city or set a sky on fire. It came as a whisper, a blackout that swept across 4 continents in perfect coordination, cloaking every human city linked to resistance activity. To the invaders, it looked like chaos. But it wasn't. It was calculated misdirection. When their surveillance systems rebooted, they discovered what had vanished in the dark: a mobile refinery ship, orbiting Earth's upper atmosphere, no longer existed. It wasn't just destroyed. It had been taken, hacked, gutted, and detonated from within, using nothing more than alien tech reassembled by human hands with no manual, no blueprint, and no permission. And it had been done in silence. The collaborators screamed for restraint, for investigation, for peace. But the invaders stopped listening to their puppets. They retaliated. Precision strikes. Coordinated detonations over human strongholds. Resistance bases burned. Refugee shelters turned to ash. Skies flickered with artificial auroras as weapons meant for planetary sieges were unleashed on rebel hideouts barely large enough to house children. But fire doesn't break stone, it just reveals the cracks. And in the ashes, something shifted. The footage came next. Low resolution. Grainy. But undeniable. It showed a human standing at the wreckage of a fallen drone, a captured alien weapon strapped to their back, rewired, repurposed, impossible. They said nothing. Just turned to the camera, nodded once, and faded into smoke. No message. No threat. But the impact was immediate. Underground nets flooded with the image. Memes, AI-generated graffiti, coded tributes. The symbol of resistance wasn't a face. It was a silence that spoke louder than 1,000 speeches. The invaders began to realize something they hadn't accounted for. They weren't just being resisted, they were being studied. Every battle lost by humans was catalogued. Every weakness in their tech exploited. What was once primitive warfare evolved rapidly. Drones now moved in unpredictable formations. Explosives used alien fuel cores, now re-engineered to destabilize their reactors. Resistance fighters wore armor not built, but grown, biotech from hijacked alien gene labs. And still, no human leader emerged. No single figure to target. They couldn't decapitate what had no head. In desperation, the invaders deployed something they had hoped to reserve, the disciplinary engines. Machines the size of buildings, designed not to fight but to erase. Cities fell in silence, pixelated from existence as matter was stripped atom by atom. It was efficient. It was horrifying. It was supposed to end the resistance. Instead, it unified it. The retaliation came not with ships, but with code. A virus, coded not by a scientist, but by a child in a bunker with a grudge, tore through the alien fleet's internal comms, mimicking their protocols, twisting their commands. In one night, 7 of their own harvesters turned on each other, mistaking fellow ships for resistance targets. The invaders tried to recover. They sealed channels. Scrambled AI. But every change they made, the humans adapted to faster. They weren't just fighting back now, they were evolving within the invaders' systems. Learning them. Bending them. And still, no demands were made. No surrender asked? Because it was never about winning. It was about reminding them. Reminding them that Earth was not a resource. Humanity was not a variable. And principle was not for sale. The invaders called them irrational. Illogical. Self-destructive. They were right. Because logic says you fight when you have the upper hand. Humanity fought because they didn't. Principle doesn't wait for odds. It only waits for a reason. And now they had one. They began sending their dead back. The invaders, for all their arrogance, followed rituals, protocols for the fallen, cargo for the grieving, honor for those lost in conquest. So the resistance hijacked it. Alien bodies were returned in custom-built steel containers, carved not with names, but with messages. One said, asterisk, "Not yours." Asterisk another read, asterisk, "You brought this." Asterisk the largest had a phrase engraved in a dozen alien dialects, asterisk, "This is mercy." Asterisk the invaders tried to censor it. Tried to spin it. But the messages spread like infection. Fear bloomed among them, not of death, but of meaning. Operation Coffin was never about tactics. It was about memory. It was about sending the same cold truth again and again. Asterisk you are not the first to try. You won't be the last to fail. Asterisk the resistance didn't hold territory. They didn't need to. They held the narrative. They turned every skirmish into a symbol. Every loss into a lesson. Then came the false bunkers, deep underground sites designed to mimic real resistance hubs, lined with scavenged alien sensors, transmitters, and bait. Invader strike teams entered them by the dozens. They never came back. Trapped by collapsing tunnels, auto-triggered EMPs, and neurochemical gas brewed from Earth's own toxic flora. When recovery drones arrived, they found nothing but sealed tombs, and one line of text etched into the final wall of each, asterisk. "You have no idea what we're willing to do." Asterisk. Fear began to spread within the invaders' own ranks. Not openly, not yet. But hesitation appeared in their formations. Delay crept into their commands. Uncertainty bloomed where there once was precision. It was more than just tactical advantage. It was psychological infection. And the humans weren't done. Deep in labs hidden beneath flooded cities and scorched forests, a new phase of weapons began to emerge, hybrids. Devices powered by hacked alien cores, fused with Earth's oldest principles, asymmetry, adaptation, and spite. One such device was made from the remains of a crashed propulsion engine, laced with carbon nanotubes, and guided by thought-linked human neurochips. It didn't fly. It hunted. Guerrilla cells began deploying them in stealth waves. No announcement. No confrontation. Alien patrols simply vanished. Outposts went silent. Ships drifted without crew. Surveillance footage, when recovered, often ended in static. When reviewed by Alien Command, the patterns made no logical sense. The attacks weren't strategic in the classical sense. They were messages written in blood and void. Then came the turning point. A full-scale alien refinery fleet, 20 vessels strong, was ambushed mid-harvest. Not by missiles or ships, but by orbital mines placed months in advance, hidden in space debris. 6 ships were lost before they even raised shields. The rest scattered. Resistance units intercepted their retreat routes, using predictive algorithms drawn from months of behavioral study. Every exit was a trap. No survivors. By now, even the Collaborator Council was disintegrating. Their messages to the public grew panicked, contradictory. Some fled. Some begged for clemency. But the resistance offered none. There was no seat at the table anymore. There was no table. For the first time, the invaders began retreating, not to regroup, but to escape. Major cities were abandoned. Harvesters left behind. Transit routes cut off. They weren't fighting a rebellion anymore. They were surviving a reckoning. And Earth gave no final warning. No offer. No truce. Because that was the lesson, the galaxy had made a mistake. It thought conquest was about strength. But it was never strength that made humanity dangerous. It was conviction. Memory. Principle. The resistance didn't fight because they thought they could win. They fought because losing would still mean someone remembered who they were. They tried to leave quietly. Their ships, scarred, limping, hollowed of pride, rose through the atmosphere without ceremony. No broadcasts. No threats. No farewells. Just retreat. But Earth watched. The resistance tracked every movement, every signal. And they let them go. Not out of mercy. Out of intention. Because there are some truths that echo louder when spoken without force. As the last of their fleet breached low orbit, a transmission was sent. Not from a satellite. Not from a government. From a dead frequency, long abandoned by human networks, yet unmistakably clear. It showed everything. The harvesters turned to rust. The bunkers turned to graves. The messages carved in steel. And then a single phrase, spoken in every known galactic dialect, asterisk. If you come again, bring coffins. Not weapons. Asterisk. The signal didn't end. It looped. Embedded itself in every comm system across known space. Their survivors brought it home with them, unwillingly. Their command structures fractured. Empires trembled. The message wasn't just heard, it was feared. Back on Earth, there was no celebration. No victory parade. No face to raise a flag. The resistance melted back into what they had always been: engineers, farmers, coders, children, caretakers. The fight hadn't made them different. It had only revealed what they already were. A species not bound by hierarchy or uniform. A species that could not be ruled by those who mistook kindness for consent. Cities were still in ruins. Forests were still scarred. Oceans bore wounds. But humanity was still here. And that was the point. That was the legacy. Not survival. Remembrance. Far beyond the solar system, in chambers of power on distant worlds, voices began to whisper of Earth. Not as a failed conquest, but as a forbidden name. A planet that shattered every model, broke every projection, defied every calculation. They gave it titles: Death World, Memory Seed, The Silent Flame. But humans didn't care what they called it. Earth had nothing to prove. One final probe was launched into deep space, carrying no weapon, no crew, no map. Just a record. A record of what had been done to Earth, and what had been done in return. Not for vengeance. Not for fear. For history. Because history, above all, is what humanity never lets go. Somewhere, atop a ruined harvester, half sunk in what used to be a battlefield, a lone figure stood. No name. No flag. Just presence. Watching the empty sky. Not with anger. Not with pride. But with memory. Because victory fades. Glory dims. But principle endures.